Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We never know where folks are coming to us from, but we're so glad that you're here today and that you took some time out of your busy day. Might even be your spring break. We know a lot of teachers are on spring break right now, or just coming off of it, or just going on to it. You might have done a full day of teaching. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we hope that you will enjoy today's webinar presentation. We have a great subject, which is how to teach high school EL students using Listenwise, and some different tips and tricks and strategies, since we know that it's an area of interest for a lot of the teachers that we serve. It's a special area of English language learning that requires more than just sort of the scaffolds um, and supports that we talk about sort of generally. When we talk, a lot of it tends to be skewed towards younger students, and we know that our older students have particular needs, and we want to make sure that we are giving them rigorous content that is interesting and engaging and on grade level as well. So we are going to be talking about that today, and I'm introducing you now to today's speakers. So we have Sarah Miller and we have Sharon Rogers, and I'm going to turn it over to them to tell us a little bit about themselves. They'll be going in much more in depth about who they serve, their schools, and their backgrounds later on in their respective areas, but I can give you a little introduction now. So I'll go in order with Sarah.
All right, hi, my name is Sarah Miller. I am a first-year teacher. I am out of a suburb in Chicago, Illinois. I teach at Fremd High School in Palatine. So I teach 9th through 12th grade, and I teach the bottom, like the lower two levels of EL and the highest level of EL. I absolutely love learning more about EL, and there's unlimited things to know. So I'm really glad I have this opportunity.
Fabulous. And Sharon.
Yes, I'm Sharon Rogers. I'm actually in Central Phoenix School. We have 85% of our students are on free or reduced lunch. So we're a Title I school. And this is my 8th year at Camelback High School in Phoenix. And actually my 10th year as a teacher overall. So, and I teach the newcomers and emergent students.
Fabulous. We have a good spread here of the different levels represented, which is fabulous. My name is Ava Vieira Osmond, and I am the Director of Marketing at Listenwise. And I'm excited to bring you this discussion today and also share with you a little bit about Listenwise if you're not familiar. And then we're going to head into listening to our teachers talk about their experiences and their strategies for using Listenwise with their high school ELs. So I wanted to just set the agenda. As I mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about Listenwise. Specifically, I wanted to talk today about our ELD lesson library and what the scaffolds and supports are. Our ELD lesson library is new-ish to Listenwise, so some of our teachers who've been using us for a long time are familiar with sort of the standard Listenwise lessons that we've had for a long time and the kinds of offerings there. But our ELD lesson libraries have some incredible supports that we're always adding to. We actually just added one the other day, which I'll talk about in a bit, that is great for ELs kind of on the lower Lexile levels. Then we'll hear from Sharon about how she uses Listenwise with her high school ELs in Arizona. And then we'll hear from Sarah about her high school ELs in Illinois. So a little bit about Listenwise, if you're not familiar. Listenwise is a fun and engaging way to teach grade level curriculum and language together while developing listening skills. So we started off several years ago as a general education product. And the idea was that students could access literacy through a different means other than just strictly reading and decoding, that they could really gain literacy skills and build those incredibly important listening skills that we don't get to spend too much time on teaching explicitly by using Listenwise. But then we found out from teachers that we worked with that Listenwise was really effective at teaching English learners because of the combination of the transcripts that we have and also the auditory component. So we really have built off of that into creating more and more content and resources for ELs and teachers of ELs. So we have podcasts, we have visuals, we have videos, and we're really about providing multiple entry points for students to learn in a meaningful and engaging way. We really want to scaffold or create scaffolding, extensive scaffolding in order to improve comprehension, but not with, we don't want to reduce the rigor of the assignments. So I have here a little screenshot of some of our newest lessons that we put, and just to show you that these are really for all different types of subject matter. So we have the sensory world of animals with science, we have ELA, different types of ELA, we have social studies. So we're always coming out with sort of new lesson content that we hope will get kids excited. The scientific view of Bigfoot sounds super interesting to me. So I think a lot of students would want to learn more about that. But yeah, we're just always trying to put new content out there for our students. And this is the ELD lesson library I mentioned. So within our lessons, we also have our ELD lesson library, which is specifically content that is for ELP levels 1 through 3. And I know every state calls this something different, but we're basically talking about the lower levels of English language proficiency. And the goal is that you can use this in combination. If you have a combination class, for example, of students at different levels of English language proficiency, you can have some of them doing an ELD lesson library lesson, and the other students could be using one of our Gen Ed versions of that lesson, or maybe a Gen Ed lesson that relates in content to what the students are learning in the ELD library lesson. So we want to create that sort of bridge. And the idea is that we have something for everybody and everyone can be learning something that is on grade level together, but at appropriate levels. So we also try to find themes for our ELD lesson libraries. It's both, content that we know that students need to be learning at this particular stage, and also something that might appeal to them particularly based on their personal experiences. So we have some great things in here that's SEL content or ELD content like picking watercress and other family stories. It's about multicultural experiences or appreciating different foods at the dinner table and things like that. So we hope to sort of draw them in that way as well. And we have over 3,000 lessons on Listenwise. We're building our ELD lesson library. So we're not at 3,000 yet for that specifically, but it's growing all the time. And our lessons range generally from 30 seconds to 5 minutes. So we try to keep it short and sweet and digestible. Here's a little preview of what it looks like. So if you were to go onto Listenwise, if you get a free trial, you would be able to go to all lessons. And then we've added this feature fairly recently where you could just go on over to the little caret or the arrow and click on lessons for ELP levels 1 through 3, and then that'll funnel things even further, or you can do lessons for ELP levels 4 through 6. We also have the ELP levels on the side of the lesson, so you can check it out and make sure that you're in the right spot as well. One of our most popular features for Listenwise is our podcast transcripts and supports. So while students are listening to the audio, they can be reading along with the transcript. Some of my colleagues like to call it sort of karaoke, where each of the different words sort of lights up with a green color, I believe it is. And so the students can follow along with the audio version. You also have the option, as you can see in the upper right, to slow things down or play them at original speed. And generally speaking, I would say that the audio doesn't get too warped when we slow it down. So it still sounds authentic, even if it is slower. And sometimes that can be a bit tricky. Our text help toolbar now comes in over 15 languages, including English, that students can use to access the transcript. So if they don't understand something in the transcript, they're able to translate it into one of 15 languages or any of 15 languages. And sometimes they can actually hear it spoken for them out loud. The translation, they'll always have it written translation available. Another option for translation that we see that works well with students sometimes, especially if they're not even that familiar with written language in their native language or their home language, is that there'll be a picture that'll come up that'll be demonstrating what it would look like for someone to, what that thing looks like, so that they can have a translation through the drawing. And this is what I was talking about before, where if you have a classroom with mixed levels, our ELD supports for ELD lesson library and our general education lessons, they're really great because they often do overlap and connect. So here's an example of that. On the left, we have our ELD lesson, library lesson. And on our right, we have our ELA general education lesson. And you can see their little link or anchor icon in the center. Within those lessons respectively, you can click on that and it'll bop you over to the lesson that accompanies that, if there is a direct accompanying lesson. So this one is an example of that. And I have a little breakdown here of what these different types of lessons mean and who they're for. And another great feature of our ELD lesson library is that they all come with our teacher instructions and our teacher guidance. So we have content that's already written out, instructions for teachers on how the assignment's going to go. And it's already spelled out for what do you do before listening, during listening, and after listening. And we also include listening organizers and other types. We have quizzes. We'll go into all these other types of pre-built-in ways to assess and ensure that students are understanding and comprehending the assignment itself. Now, I've given you this overview. I am going to pass it over to Sharon, and we're going to hear from Sharon a bit about her experiences teaching both ELD in Arizona and also how she uses Listenwise with her students. So Sharon, go ahead and take it away.
All right, so I thought it would be a good thing to start with what we call our proficiency levels in Arizona, just because that's the terminology that I'm used to, and that's what I'll be using. This year, I'm teaching pre-emergent, emergent, so those would be levels 1 and 2, or entering, beginning. I believe that's WIDA that uses those terms and those levels. Then basic would be probably levels 3 to 4, developing or expanding. Intermediate would be 4 to 5, expanding to bridging. And then proficient 6 would probably be reaching. So currently I'm teaching pre-emergent, emergent. When I first started using Listenwise, I was teaching intermediate students for the first time during the pandemic. So Listenwise was truly a godsend for me then. And the last 2 years, I taught basic level students. So I have used Listenwise with all of the ELD levels that we teach in Arizona. So this is my 4th year using it. And so first of all, to Ava's point, it's just amazing to have grade level content that's also level appropriate for our students. That was always the biggest challenge, was finding reasonable listening materials for our students. And could we go to the next slide, please? So I put some ideas here as far as what levels and strategies might be most useful at the different levels. And obviously, even with ELP 1 through 3 lessons, our pre-emergent students are going to need the highest level of support. So I always start by introducing the lesson and doing it as a whole class activity. We listen together. We start, of course, with the building background information. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful to have the short videos, and in most cases, multiple pictures, different images to accompany the material and introduce the concepts and the ideas before listening. So I always start my whole class lesson with my pre-emergents, starting with that building background. We also then focus on vocabulary. We use the vocabulary organizer, and we keep a vocabulary notebook. And when students listen the first time as a whole class, we always start with just listening for the gist, listening for the prosody. How does it sound? Really not focusing on specific vocabulary or meaning the first listen. That's all about just that high level overview and seeing how it works and hearing the words spoken. And I apologize, I'm moving back and forth with my phone here. So I'm also trying to read this because it's very tiny on my phone. Okay. We typically do most of our work as a whole class at the pre-emergent level and the pre-emergent emergent level. And we do definitely follow the teacher instructions and the guidelines that for before listening and during listening, in terms of doing multiple listens, focusing first on the gist, then on maybe listening for specific facts. I also usually introduce the quiz questions and the discussion questions before we start to listen. The second or third time. We always do at least 3. I don't introduce the questions before the first listen because I really just want them to focus on the words, focus on what they're hearing. But then before the second or third listen, we go through and look at what the discussion and quiz questions will be so that we know what to listen for on those second and third listens. I always do the first listen at regular speed. And then depending on the complexity of the language and how fast the speaker actually speaks, we may or may not use the slower speed. Sometimes I make that decision. Sometimes the students will actually request that. And then after we've worked together as a class, again, it depends on the audio lexile and the complexity of the material. I will either assign students to work on the assignment and the quiz independently or in pairs or small groups. And then we'll also use those as, we'll also then discuss those things together as a whole class at the end. And you can see that with the basic and intermediate level, I reduce the amount of support that I offer. Obviously, again, it depends on which specific podcasts we're using. And I still tend to introduce to the whole class and begin as a whole class at the basic level. Intermediate level, I only introduce as a whole class the first time we use Listenwise to introduce it to students and help students learn how to navigate it. And after that, those intermediate students need to do a lot more independent work. So those are the groupings and strategies that I tend to use that I find the most successful. And if you go on to the next slide, I'll talk about some of the things that I've used. So the first thing that is really exciting for me in using Listenwise is that it contains so much relevant information. We have co-taught classes for science on our campus. So I've used science lessons or referred to students and teachers to science lessons. But in my English language development classes, I tend to focus more on things that either tie directly to our ELD curriculum. If you're an EL teacher, you probably know or have heard of Kate Kinsella. That's our adopted curriculum with English 3D. And there are a lot of lessons that tie directly to that, to some of that content. For example, the immigrant experience ties very well with the first lesson in language launch, which is designed for the lower level English speakers. The other thing that I love about Listenwise and that I frequently use for Listenwise are things that are podcasts that connect to or explain US holidays. So holidays that are unique to the United States. So every year students want to know, why do we have Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a holiday? What is that? And so we'll usually start working on our Listenwise 2 or 3 days before Luther King Jr. Day. And then we'll usually finish up a day or two afterwards. And I always use these materials and these lessons to be jumping off points for a speaking assignment that follows it, where they have to take the material that they've been learning about and then record themselves talking about either main idea and supporting details, or relating it to some similar holiday, whatever, to keep it interesting and fresh. Students really were very interested in the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream. It was a lot of fun to work on. Same thing with immigrant experience. They really resonate with a lot of our students. We also, I also like to find things that connect to students' cultures. And being here in Arizona, we have many students from Mexico, and they're familiar with the Aztec and the Mayans and those indigenous cultures. And so for Valentine's Day, we did Mayans and the history of chocolate. And so again, a fun link to talk about in authentic language, to talk about some holidays and refresh some history and honor the cultural background of a large group of my students. And then I also like to do things that just sort of point out some of the crazy things about English. Something we don't often think about is just how unusual and unique spelling is in English, and the fact that English is one of the few languages that really isn't very phonetic. And so I use the podcast Spelling Bee Fun, and I often do that in conjunction with the movie Aquila and the Bee. So kids can learn the background of what a spelling bee is, because it's a completely foreign concept to kids who speak languages that are very phonetic, where, what it sounds like, that's how you spell it. So again, just very relevant, age appropriate, level appropriate, just such rich resources to really engage our students. So.
Fabulous. Thank you, Sharon. I just wanted to piggyback on some of these lessons you're specifically talking about and reasons why I think they're so fantastic for your students. As you mentioned, one of the things that I think I think people may not consider as such a important part of the listening experience is that you're hearing in Listenwise lessons first person accounts of things, or directly from the speaker who's experienced it. And a lot of times, sometimes it's archived, sometimes it's an interview, and there really is just nothing like hearing directly from somebody what their lived experience is like. And the immigrant experience lesson, I think, does a really great job of that, of hearing from somebody who is not too far removed from being truly a newcomer to the country and having to, I have a slide later about this, but learning how a Starbucks order is, what the different words in a Starbucks order is. I mean, it's complete. I'm old enough, I guess, to remember when Starbucks first really hit the scene, and all the stand-up comedians would talk about how ridiculous these words were and like, what is this? But it's its own language now that we've learned in America as Starbucks. And so that's even in of itself an interesting thing. And yeah, the Martin Luther King Jr. I Have a Dream, that this idea that some of these are, even for English language natives, feel like foreign concepts because these are things that happened a very long time ago and can seem unbelievable sometimes. And just that media literacy and being able to listen to and get exposure to these real life events and hear from the people that were directly involved is just really invaluable. So I love these lessons too. And the Mayan history of chocolate one is a favorite of mine too, because
Oh yeah,
very fun and delicious.
yes.
So here, this is what I was talking about. So closer look at the lesson. So this is a little bit about the immigrant experience ELD lesson. And why I wanted to sort of blow this up for you is that on the bottom right of the little screenshot that I took, you can see that icon of the anchor, and that indicates that you can click on that and go to the gen ed version of the lesson. And this is just from one of the this is from the transcript of the audio. They talk about this woman from or girl from Somalia and talking about how she became very fluent in English very quickly working at Starbucks. And it also made her have to learn all this unusual vocabulary that would not be in our first 90 days curriculum typically, about crumble or skinny, what is a skinny vanilla latte, all the stuff. So I really liked pulling that out to share. And then a closer look at the teacher's guide and quiz. So I wanted to share this is from that lesson as well. Just a little snapshot, and also includes a new feature that we just added, which is now you can download a PDF of our ELD lesson library. We didn't used to have that before. So now you can just download it and print it, and you're good to go. You don't have to sort of copy and paste or do any of that stuff. So made it easier for you. You can see we have our before listening and some examples of what you might find there, some examples of what a quiz question might be. So what does the woman say she misses from her home country to assess for whether or not their comprehension was there for that lesson. And then a listening organizer preview as well, a fill in the blank organizer. We've had that ready to go, tailored to that lesson. So you can just print that out, or you can have students do it on the computer if you'd like, and it's ready to go. All right, Sarah, tell us about ELD in Illinois.
Perfect. So again, I'm Sarah Miller. I am a first year teacher from high school in Palatine. So kind of how our department works is we're kind of all intermixed with different levels. Every year kind of switches up. So we're all really familiar with our 5 different levels that we teach. It is divided up very similar to how Sharon, her school district works, and how the state kind of divides up. Our district has been switching into WIDA standards instead of just like the normal CLSs that you would see from like the Board of Education. They're starting to try to move away from those. So we have more direct standards to work with for EL students, which is honestly really great. We have much more of a focus. So pretty much levels 1 through 4. So it's very similar. I took this off of WIDA's website as well. Super similar, where we have our pre-emergent, emergent to basic, intermediate, and then our proficient. So as for us, we base that off of the access test that is taken every February, January/February. And then that allows us to place them the next year with teacher recommendation. So I teach levels 1, 2, and 5. So I kind of have both ends here, where I have nearly proficient students and just coming to the country. So it's very different. It really pushes me to be really creative with that. Something kind of special about, I don't know about any other states, but as for our school district, we do double period English. So one class will focus on reading, listening together. Another teacher will work on writing and speaking with that same group of students. So for my level 1 students, I have them for reading and listening. My level 2, I have them for writing and speaking. Level 5 is the exception, where it's just 1 period, very similar to mainstream English. Most of our students are coming from Ukraine and Venezuela as of right now. We have a very dense population coming in from Europe. A lot of people from Ukraine, Poland, Kyrgyzstan, Mongolia, things like that, where they're starting to come in a little bit more from those areas. So we have kids from all over the place, very diverse groups. So yeah, that kind of brings me into like how I use Listenwise with such a diverse group. So the biggest struggle that I had coming into EL was trying to find relevant literacy. Trying to find relevant text that is not elementary for high school students was the biggest task that I had to tackle. And I remember struggling really bad to find specifically nonfiction text that was still allowing them to feel like a young adult or a teenager, things that they see on their social media apps and everything. And my biggest goal as a teacher was to provide authentic education. They're already really nervous to be here. They're already on edge a bit about their language skills. So if I could provide them a little piece of history or some new knowledge about things going on in our everyday lives, to show them that we can use this platform to learn more about those things, especially for my level 1 and 2s. Sometimes I find it hard to share those nonfiction news. Um, like you see big world events happening, and they know a lot about world events just coming from their native countries. They come in with news all the time about like politicians and governments and big events happening like war, and they're always informed, and they like to be informed about those things. So um the best part about Listenwise is it's really easy to for me to find those nonfiction texts. um the way I kind of look it up is through Lexile levels. We have Lexiles that were determined by the district, that kind of give us some insight as to like the idealistic range of levels of reading that we have with our students. Another thing that I really, really like, especially even in writing and speaking, in order to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader. In order to be a good speaker, you have to be a good listener. They're never apart from each other. And I try to remind them that even though I might be teaching you just reading and listening or writing and speaking, all these skills intersect together. And my biggest goal is to make them functional people outside of the school. So when I look into finding articles, I want to make sure I'm finding something that challenges them, but makes them feel pretty comfortable in their own skills and abilities that they can do all of these things. So, kind of being able to engage them and use these different stories ends up kind of working in our favor, where they are learning active listening skills, even if they're in a writing speaking class. They're learning reading comprehension at the same exact time as active listening, which is really huge for even when I'm talking to them or somebody else is talking to them, they're at work, whatever it might be. And then with our short quizzes, I mean, it's really nice to just get a little insight of like how much can you understand from 10 like 25 seconds of a podcast, or can you understand a full 2 minutes? Like what can you understand? So it kind of gives me as a teacher a little bit of like a data point that I can refer back to when I'm looking at the results of these comprehension quizzes. And let me tell you, the kids levels 1 and 2, man, so they love these articles. Like they love listening to it. So making it fun for them is really important to me. Um so then I can kind of tell you a little bit more about how I use it more on like a weekly kind of basis, or like more in that sense. So
I'm
yeah, so
actually just gonna,
that's an easy way to find it. Yes.
oh, awesome. So I was just gonna quickly pop in here and just show literally what it looks like to look up by Lexile level. Again, you can go to the ELD, ESL, search by ELP levels 1 through 3 or 4 to 6, and then you have that little icon there. So just providing that visual. And here's more from Sarah.
Yes. So these are kind of like the Lexile language, the Lexiles for specific levels. They kind of put the grade level equivalent, which is really nice too, especially when you're looking sometimes in the platform, like it shows like a grade level. So it's kind of nice that I can use both Lexile and grade level to help me determine if a text is too challenging, too easy, things like that. Um, so the three particular ways that I like to use this, such a great sub plan. If you are ever you want your students to really learn language still when you are not present. That I feel like is the hardest thing sometimes, is trying to think of like what can I comfortably leave a substitute with that like I know my kids will be engaged with, and it's not teaching them brand new information that you want to be there to teach. Um, this is only scaffolding more and more on their prior knowledge. as they keep moving along, the text can get a little bit longer, or maybe you bump it up another 100 in the Lexile. So there's so much wiggle room that you have with this. It's very easy to use. You assign them the quiz and the reading, and I love how it highlights as they listen. It is engaging them with that active listening. So I use that constantly when I am looking at, okay, what is going to align them with those standards, but at the same time, something that is going on in our everyday lives that they should know about. Another thing is, because I'm so driven to have authentic material in my classroom, I always use this as a supplementary material, because a lot of our textbooks are speaking on nonfiction, but some of the textbooks can be a little bit older, so it's maybe not the newest information out there, but it is talking about like real life topics. But engaging them with, like, if there is a lesson about like the beach or going on vacation, I'm going to automatically look in Listenwise to try to find something about like going to the beach or going on vacation, visiting a new place. I use it to build on it, so they're not doing worksheets all day, or and they're not listening to me speak the whole time. It's very interactive. And I view myself as a facilitator of teaching them English rather than direct instruction. So I love using that so we can kind of connect together, have good conversations, and that's encouraging their informal and formal speaking skills. Um, and again, I just love with the Lexiled speaking, or the Lexiled reading. It is truly difficult, and I wish we had more of this present, but I'm really glad I ran into Listenwise, because we were able to build such a strong curriculum where I felt like we weren't leaving them out of our everyday world, and our everyday lives, things in like the community. I feel like now it's engaged me with a little bit more for my tool belt, so I can prepare the students. They can read things that they feel like they're in the loop. They feel like they're at the same level as everyone else, and they're able to still speak on it, work on those comprehension skills, work on writing, work on speaking. Like, it just hits all four domains. So it's really great. And even with my highest level, my level 5, like, we're getting into, like, we're writing essays and researching. We're doing pretty much mainstream type of work. And especially when I'm trying to um, relate them with some sort of research, or show them that a concept or a topic we're talking about is relevant, I always am sure to bring them to Listen Wise and show them, like, this stuff is happening in our everyday lives right now. Like, this is something right now. And like, how does this affect you? And how do you relate to this? And I always try to spark conversation from it. And it ends up being great for like discussion questions that are prompted from Listen Wise, or comprehension questions we want to talk about. Take a little bit of a different approach with level 5, just because they're pretty good at, engaging with reading comprehension. Like, they're reading full articles by researchers and things. So it's nice to kind of give them a little bit of a taste of something different, and allow them to engage with something that they very may well see on the news the next day, or that same day, or on TikTok or Instagram. I'm not that old, so, like, I use those platforms as well frequently, and it's nice to know that, even if I see something on my social media, I'll look it up on Listenwise, and I'm like, oh, this ties in perfect, like, with the topic we're talking about. I'm always thinking about the students in my life, and yeah. So when it comes to Listenwise, this is just like a great platform for me to use that really hones everything together, gives a little bit more of like a holistic view of your curriculum, and just helps tie everything together.
Fabulous. Well, so as you were talking, I was thinking about I am a TikTok user. I'm also not too old to be doing that. Or maybe I am. I don't know. It depends on what TikTok says. But we recently published an article or a lesson that was about de-influencing, which I thought was super interesting and timely, because that's definitely something that, despite the platform being built to influence people to do or buy whatever, a lot of influencers are becoming influencers based off of de-influencing people to buy things. And so we have a lesson on that in one of our gen ed lessons. And potentially, if you felt like that was something your students would find really interesting and really connect to, that could be something that you could apply different scaffolds to, that would be very timely and very much connect to something that they might be seeing on their phone, after class, hopefully not during class, but
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted, on that note of sort of lessons, Sarah, do you have some lessons that, you don't have to remember their particular names, but content that you can recall that your students were particularly engaged with that you wanted to share?
When we were, for my level ones last semester, we were learning about Earth, and man, like, this is the most lively, fun group of kids I've ever worked with. And they were just so into learning about like the phases of the moon. We started to talk about that and how it kind of affects like the ocean and things like that. And I, as we were listening, they were talking. There was a lesson on Listenwise about the phases of the moon, and it was like kind of an interview style type of podcast where they were this guy was interviewing a child to talk about the phase of the moon, and we press the slower, which I love for the lower levels. I do the slower for sometimes, but I like to show them the normal rate of speaking. And they got up and they were like moving their bodies into like different shapes and drawing on the board, and I'd like without me even saying anything. And I just love that that's what it took for them to hear, and they're like, oh, we know that, like. And it kind of reminds them that, the reinforcement of hearing information multiple times actually is working, like it's doing something. And it was so fun to see them that they were instantly into it, and they were like, oh, we know the phases of the moon. And then I would ask them vocabulary terms like verbally, written through the reading, and then we'd answer the comprehension questions together. And with like flying colors, they were able to get such good, it was like 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5. So it's really great to see that they enjoyed listening to it. And it was like a minute and a half, I believe. It was pretty short. And man, did they were all over it. Yeah, Faces of the Moon is a hit. They love Earth.
Awesome. Oh, I love to hear that. Thank you for sharing. And just before we close out this evening, I wanted to let our folks know on our webinar, we're sort of spreading the word organically at this point, but we have exciting news, which is that we are going to be launching a new product for Back to School 2024. And it is called LingoLift. And this is going to be our new product that is designed just for newcomers. So we have, as we mentioned, our ELD lesson library, and we have our gen ed, and they connect to each other with the little links and just the content in general. But what we really didn't have was something that was explicitly designed for newcomers, that was going to teach all 4 of the literacy domains together in a way that hopefully gets them a chance to use all of them every day. So one of the great things about this is it's going to be just like Listenwise, it's going to be designed for grades 2 through 12, but it's going to teach with a watch, learn, speak sequence, so that students will get an opportunity to watch videos, listen, read along, and also speak back to the LingoLift platform, so that we can give them real time feedback on how they're doing with their pronunciation, with their responses verbally. So this is very exciting. We are literally building it right now. We can't wait to show it to everybody, but we are going to be sending out lots more information about it in the future. But since you came to this webinar, or since you're watching this webinar, I wanted you to be some of the first people to know about it. So stay tuned more for LingoLift coming soon. And that is it for this evening, or afternoon or morning, wherever you are. I wanted to thank our speakers very much for coming and telling us about their students, about how Listenwise has worked in their classroom. And before we leave, we will just offer up a few seconds to see if anybody wants to jump in with a question for anybody. We would love to answer your questions if you have specific questions for any of our speakers. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming.